Good morning, everyone. As you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic is disrupting global supply chains with consequences for businesses, consumers, and the global economy. Enterprises are scrambling to respond to urgent questions about how to ensure supply security, mitigate the financial impact, address reputational risks, and navigate market uncertainty. While many companies have engaged in business continuity and risk management planning, traditional methods have largely centered on reacting to localized events pertaining to a specific geography or a sector. The latest global supply chain disruptions underline the need for a new paradigm to develop supply chain resilience. The need for end-to-end visibility has never been greater, one for organizations as they strive to keep up with the dynamic market and consumer demands. In this session, learn how SAP and SuneraTech's digital supply chain capabilities have helped companies, the likes of Unilever and Valvoline, transform their traditional supply chains to a connected digital supply chain network for the intelligent enterprise. It is my pleasure to introduce Richard Howells from SAP Digital Supply Chain. Richard brings over 25 years of experience in business and technology, helping enterprises implement software and business solutions in areas of ERP, supply chain, IoT, and manufacturing. At SAP, Richard drives market direction and strategy for extended supply chain solutions, and is a spokesperson for the Digital Supply Chain Group. Please welcome Richard.
Hello, my name's Richard Howells. I'm the VP of Thought Leadership and Awareness for our Digital Supply Chain Solutions at SAP, where I focus on identifying business challenges and trends and where our supply chain solutions should go moving forward. And I wanted to cover a few things. The topic of this session is all about resiliency and driving resilient and sustainable supply chains. And I think over the last 6 months, we've had every disruption possible in the supply chain. We're used to supply chain disruptions, but this year in particular has really raised the bar as far as challenges is concerned, and also raised the importance of supply chains within the business context and within companies. We're now seeing supply chains as boardroom discussions, and supply chains have a seat at the table. And it's the whole COVID pandemic has really shone a light on some of the challenges that we face in supply chains, and also some supply chain success stories. I mean, we all started with uncertain supply as the borders shut down in China and manufacturing facilities closed. We saw volatile demand, and everyone was looking to buy the same 20 or 30 products in the stores, which ended up in shortages for commodity items. And the sales of luxury items pretty much dropped off the cliff. We saw capacity constraints, both in manufacturing facilities due to closures and also to restrictions as far as environmental health and safety concerns were, and in logistics and the logistics process and the availability of transportation, and whether it was physically possible to drive from one location to another or move goods from one location to another. And the whole risk of the supply chain around employee safety and security became a major imperative. But we saw many companies striving to survive and thrive in this environment, and took a lot, and it was the supply chains of these companies that really helped them. We all see stories around the shortages of toilet paper, for example. And we work with several paper and hygiene product manufacturers who look to reduce the number of products that they were bringing to market in this last 6 months, and relied on their supply chain to identify the correct demand for those products and which packaging variations they should be bringing to markets. We dealt with high-tech manufacturers whose demand increased because people were working from home and schools were at home and the need for computers and technologies rose. But their challenge was all around not necessarily not having the inventory, but having the transportation to move the inventory from one place to another. Pharmaceutical companies that were closing sites, reopening sites, and needing the ability to simulate their planning scenarios and do what-if analysis every day of how the demand was changing. And then there were food companies who may have traditionally been selling to hotels and universities and other educational facilities. And they saw their demand drop completely as these facilities closed down. and they had to change their packaging mix. They sold the same volume of bulk product, but in different packaging varieties and to different target markets through the retail stores and online sales to consumers. And all of these drove supply chain change and really highlighted the importance and the need for a resilient supply chain. And we broke this down into 3 real-time buckets. We wanted to have the ability to respond in the short term, in the first 3 months, and have the agility and speed to respond. We termed the second phase the recovery phase, and we're still in that phase, and we will be for a good while onwards, but it really is being in a position to respond to customers' demands and prepare for growth. And ultimately, we want to be able to reimagine these supply chains for sustainable growth and leverage predictive capabilities, automation and innovation to drive profitability. And what we're seeing let's skip through the respond phase, where we all know stories about how companies collaborated with each other. They manufactured different products that they hadn't historically produced, making hand sanitizer versus alcohol, or the protective equipment and ventilators from other industries, and talk about the recover phase. And what we talk about when we talk about supply chain is the concepts from design to operate. How we design new products, how we manufacture them and deliver them, and how they operate in the field. Depending on the industry, there's an after-sales service market where you have to manage and maintain those pieces of equipment or those products at the customer sites. And all of this works across a network. And we need to make sure that the whole design to operate process is ready for the recovery and the reimagine phase. We need to be able to design products anywhere and manufacture them anywhere. We need to make sure that we have alternate sourcing strategies for purchasing the raw materials and intermediates, and making sure that we're not stuck in a single source strategy, which caused many problems in the supply chains in the early phase of the pandemic. When it comes to planning, we need to do the ability to plan more rapidly. Long are the days gone of the S&OP process that's a month or 3 month process. We're talking about weekly planning cycles, if not daily planning cycles in the heat of the pandemic. Having the ability to do what-if analysis and scenarios and simulations to make better informed decisions. Determining where to best position inventory across the supply chain, to balance, to drive inventory optimization processes and position the right products at the right place for the right demand or for the actual demand. And when it comes to delivery processes and logistics processes, having the ability to optimize, to plan and optimize route scheduling, and leveraging social distancing within manufacturing facilities and warehouses to make sure that we can get the products to the customer. And talking about manufacturing and logistics, again, it's all about the safety of the employees. Having processes and tools in place to enable social distancing, but still be productive. And that means optimizing the capacity that is available and making sure that the equipment is running when you need it and where you need it. And having agile manufacturing processes to respond to change and have the adaptability and flexibility to react to changing demand with shorter production runs. We're moving from continuous production lines to really responsive manufacturing cells where we can switch things in and out of a production run based on the demand that's happening on that day. We don't have a frozen 2-week period. And ultimately, we do everything with a network. We rely on the network of partners, of suppliers, of contract manufacturers, of logistics service providers. And bringing all of that information together from all of these members of the network to drive better decisions, to improve collaboration, and really have the flexibility then to respond to change across the business network. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is the whole concept of reimagining supply chains moving forward. As I said right at the start, supply chains and supply chain executives now have a seat at the table. Supply chains are front and center and top of mind. Supply chains can help all across a business. We start by centering our processes around our customers and delivering that perfect order and delivering what they require and desire. But we also have to think about the employees in the supply chain, how they can work more productively, how they can leverage technologies and automation and concepts such as Industry 4.0 to improve productivity in the workplace, to give them the tools and the data to make better and informed decisions and to improve their own productivity. We have to think about the shareholders. The whole concept of this panel is around sustainable growth. And we want to grow sustainably, and we want to grow profitably. And driving supply chain processes and capturing all the information from the supply chain to give you the right information to make those decisions, and even leverage predictive technologies to make decisions and automate the decisions, really does add value and makes the company more successful, more profitable. And always top of mind is sustainability. You want sustainable growth from a financial standpoint, but you want to also be a sustainable company. I, as a consumer, like many others, want to buy goods from companies that are sustainable. They design and manufacture and deliver ethically sourced products with low carbon emissions. You make sure that these products are recyclable and have a closed loop all the way from design to decommission of that product. So sustainability is a major driving factor of many businesses today. And supply chains are one of the areas where we can improve and meet our sustainability goals moving forward. So really what we've talked about is having a supply chain that is both resilient and sustainable. Resilient to change, resilient to disruption, but also resilient to take advantage of opportunities when they arrive, and at all times acting sustainably. So that's really what I wanted to share in this short discussion. So thank you very much, and hope you enjoyed the rest of the event.
Thank you, Richard, for your insights on the way enterprises across verticals are reimagining their business processes as they strive to build a sustainable, resilient supply chain. Here's a very interesting fact for all of us. According to a recent report in Gartner, more than 50% of organizations are yet to plan or start their journey of supply chain digital transformation. In this context, let me introduce the next two speakers for the session, who've been pioneers in driving digital transformation innovations across their organization and have done it with great results. First up, we have Mr. Shashwat Singh, IT and Digital Supply Chain Lead for Unilever South Asia, who will talk to us about how Unilever has leveraged the power of Sunera's digital supply chain solution eSeal and SAP to build a resilient digital supply network. Our second speaker for the day, Mr. Sanjay Awasthi, Vice President Valvoline, will take us to the journey of Valvoline's transition from a traditional supply linear network to a well-connected digital supply network. Over to you, Shashwat.
Good morning, everyone. So I'd like to thank SuneraTech for the opportunity to come and speak to all of you today. I'm going to very briefly talk about the digital supply chain transformation and how we used eSeal and SAP to achieve that. Content before I get on to the actual work that has been done using eSeal and SAP. And this, because of the pandemic that has come in, the kind of impact that it has on supply chains definitely deserves a mention. And we also need to look at how various supply chains have dealt with the impact of pandemic that has that hit us starting around March 2020. So we need to then maybe break down the problem into smaller pieces and see how companies overcame a total disruption that happened in a country like India, right, with a complete lockdown. What are the various things that each of the supply chain had to deal with, starting from, unlocking each and every supply chain node one at a time. So look at starting from the raw material, packing material suppliers, till the end customers. Every single node came under the lockdown, and to be able to unlock each one of them with adequate representation being made at various levels in the government. At the same time, getting that visibility to see which of these nodes have been unlocked, which of these nodes are already suffering from a complete lockdown. That became an activity that we had never engaged in before. Classification of essentials and non-essential goods. I mean, that is also something which became an extremely important in an Indian context, wherein during the lockdown, the government had only allowed production and distribution of essential goods. All of this required that we have almost a real-time and accurate data visibility corresponding to each of these nodes in the supply chain. Data points which supply chains had not dealt with before, such as whether a representation has been made at our district level, whether a representation has been made at a state level, what is the current status, do we have to have further discussions with government to get these supply chain nodes unlocked, and so on and so forth. This also required a very close coordination between all the functions, right from legal, IT, supply chain, and the front end supply chain, such as the sales functions. As a result of all of this, digital became front and center, obviously in these times, to sustain operations. Now, before I get on to the actual subject that I'm going to talk about, let me just focus a little bit on the top priorities that the FMCG organizations have as of now, and how are these top priorities being facilitated and supported by technology. So, as per a Gartner report, top 5 priority FMCG organizations, obviously, I mean, the first one, which is a very known one, is to drive revenue and business growth. The second one is to strive for operational excellence. Third one is to go digital. Fourth one, obviously, is to have an impact on the bottom line and do cost optimization / reduction. And the last priority for the FMCG organization is to improve customer experience on an ongoing basis. As a result of which, there is an increased funding that is happening in a few technology areas across the board in FMCG organizations, starting from automation. Now, something as basic as an RPA getting used to automate, mundane tasks that are there. And we spoke about hyper automation in the last Digital Acceleration Summit hosted by Sunera last year. E-commerce website is also getting more and more prominent. Cloud first approach is being utilized and advocated upon by almost all the tech evangelists these days. Digital business initiatives and data intelligence and analytics are the top technology areas wherein we're seeing a lot of increased funding. From here on, let me move on to some of the top tech trends that are out there in the market, and I'm going to bring it all together very briefly. So some of these latest technology trends that are there in the market, we've already heard about blockchain and ERP quite significantly and for a while. Cloud, including anything as a service, mobile, including 5G nowadays, automation, business intelligence. These are the technology trends which are in vogue in 2020. There are, however, top 4 trends which I want to just very briefly touch upon. So Internet of Things, I'm not going to get into these individual details, and obviously most of you or all of you would have heard of all of this, right? So Internet of Things, data analytics, AI, machine learning, and digital transformation. Now, these are the top 4 trends in technology. From here on, let me just drill down and focus on the latest trends which are sitting or impacting the FMCG industry as of now. So some of these are digital experimentation, customer engagement, traceability, and this is what I'm going to talk about a little bit more in details in the next couple of minutes. Sustainability. So whatever you do, obviously for a company like Unilever, sustainability is front and center in everything that we do. Digitizing safety as well as quality. Personalization, and personalization has now become so prevalent that we are even talking about mass personalization. Transparency, so initiatives around farm to fork to be able to understand the provenance of the food that you're consuming. That is also something which is becoming very relevant. Smart manufacturing, having manufacturing facilities that can flex intelligently based on the demands that are coming through. Various channels and augmented reality. So these are the latest trends in the FMCG industry. The reason I wanted to talk about all of this is to very clearly establish the importance of having traceability in a supply chain. So we looked at the impact that the pandemic has had on the supply chain. From there on, we've talked about the top priority areas for the FMCG organizations. Then we looked at the top technology trends out there in the market and the ones which are impacting the FMCG industry. So one of the latest trend in the FMCG industry is to ensure that there is an end-to-end traceability in your supply chain, and that is where eSeal comes in handy. Yeah. So, and also before we get into talking about how and what eSeal has enabled in unlocking traceability, let me just talk about some of the drivers for supply chain transformation as to why do supply chains need to transform. There are a few challenges that each of these supply chains are facing as of now. And that is, there is significant increase in customer expectation. Customers do expect delivery in hours these days, and that too in full, on time, and almost all the time, right? There are several options in which consumers can make purchases as of now, and therefore multiple channels through which this is exposed. At the same time, for the same product, the number of options that consumers are made available with, they're spoiled for choice. At the same time, the FMCG companies are now facing left field competition from the likes of, say, Amazon B2B or an Udaan coming up in India, and so on and so forth. To cater to these key challenges, some of the success factors that will define a successful supply chain would be a supply chain which has real-time tracking, almost a digital twin equivalent of the supply chain, wherein at each of these nodes that I've been talking about, you get reality of how that node is performing, what was it supposed to do, and how is it faring against the targets. Real-time data availability and analytics, so that data is made available to the key business stakeholders who are supposed to act on that data on time, every time. Yeah, we had a traditional approach of looking at supply chain as 4 pillars of plan, source, make, and deliver. Now, all of these 4 pillars have to be so closely integrated that there has to be almost a bidirectional information flow between the two, and that to real time. And therefore, which brings me to the next point, that we're not really looking at a supply chain anymore, but it's something which needs to evolve as a supply network, therefore leading to speed and agility in how a supply chain performs. From here on, let me then just spend a minute talking about how traceability in a supply chain is going to benefit supply chain immensely. So you consider a scenario wherein there is a quality defect that has come in the front end supply chain, and if you are able to zero down that particular quality defect, the shift in which that particular material was manufactured in your factory, and also to be able to trace up to the most granular level which raw materials have gone into that particular batch that has a quality defect. What it enables you to do, one, it enables you to do very quick block of stocks which have gone into an issue, and at the same time to be able to zero down the quality issue so that it can be nipped in the bud. Yeah. So when we're looking at traceability in a supply chain, I'm looking for a more holistic picture, starting from raw materials, packing materials, so you have an RMPM traceability of what really has gone into your supply chain. From there on, looking at how do we go ahead and digitize even your engineering store operations, wherein spares are getting consumed, which spare is getting consumed where. Can we go ahead and have online production booking in your manufacturing setup? Warehouse-based operations, so whether it is internal warehouse operations, inbound operations, or outbound operations, can all of it then be governed by barcode-based, scan-based operations, so that there is no scope of manual errors, and the efficiencies and efficiencies and accuracies are at a very high level from an inventory perspective as well. I spoke about this when I spoke about the example. So from a customer's perspective, can we go ahead and track which particular which particular batch produced in which factory using which raw materials, and that kind of transparency is made available to the customers. And obviously all of this enabling the end-to-end traceability all throughout the supply chain will ensure that your billing is accurate, you're not really dispatching anything incorrectly, your dispatch accuracies, etc. would also increase. Yeah, from all of this, I think enough context has been said. Now let me talk about how we are using eSeal in our setup. Yeah. So we are currently doing not a pilot per se, but it's an implementation that has happened in Sri Lanka. It is simpler in this particular geography to do this in Sri Lanka, primarily because in Sri Lanka there are palletized movements that happen, which means from a manufacturing location to the DC and even to the customer, the goods are moving in pallets. Yeah, and therefore the number of, if you consider that each of your cases in which material, each of cases are coded, and if you need to scan that barcode every time you do an inward or an outward movement, the kind of operational impact that it has on the warehousing operations efficiency, it's significant. And therefore it becomes really easy for us to do it in a country wherein there are palletized based on pallet level barcodes getting scanned. Yeah, but the intent with which we started doing this was to bring in end-to-end traceability in our supply chain right from the end of line manufacturing, for us to be able to do production booking automated at the end of the line. And in this last slide that I have, if you look at it, there are certain snippets of how this is getting used. There's a video that I've kind of embedded in this slide, which talks about how we are generating the barcode at the end of the line, how that barcode is getting dispensed and stickered on the cases, and at the same time, just next step, how is it getting read so that the production booking, etc. can work. Some of the benefits that we're looking at while doing so, obviously looking at automating processes such as production booking, inwards, outward movements, etc. And therefore, where the use case has been built around FTE reduction. We're also looking at reduction in a lot of discrepancy stock. So SLED expiry reduction. We're also looking at best before date wastage reduction. And we're also looking at cutting down the overall cycle times in case of a product recall. All of this in our setup as of now is getting enabled through a very novel and a very nice usage of eSeal. So this is what I wanted to kind of cover today. Hope guys you had some fun and there are some key takeaways for you listening to this session. Thank you for your time. Thanks.
So good morning, good evening everyone there. This is Sanjay Awasthi from Valvoline Private Limited. Now, let me talk about our company. This is a 150-year-old company, and we primarily started our operation in US, and now currently we operate in 140 countries. Overall turnover annually, globally, if you see, is a $2.3 billion. So from there, just coming to a very specific subject, which we'll be talking today. This is Valvoline's transition to a connected digital supply chain, and this journey, what we have done so far and what we are going to do it. This is what I'm going to cover it. So before I get into that, let me give you some background, what's happening in supply chain and how this consumer behavior is changing over the period of time. Now we are living into a digital economy where you see tons and tons of data, which is all around, and buyers are consumers. They are having access to all this data. And they have a lot of choices. It's not only one company, they have a choices to choose. Under this, this speed is something which become a differentiator. Now, over the period of time, there's all the consumer behavior which has changed is leading to 3-4 supply chain challenges. If we see behavior, specific behavior, customers are more demanding now, and they expect a rapid deliveries as compared to earlier. They need variety at a right cost, and in most of the cases is a lower cost. And of course, with this all, huge volatility in demand. The kind of surge comes in a demand, many times supply chain is find it difficult to manage it. Now, with this all challenges, and these challenges will remain, and the supply chain which will be able to address this will be a differentiator. So few of the things which supply chain has to do is a real-time visibility across supply chain. Second comes combine the forecast with demand sensing. Third comes break silos, have an integrated business planning. So these are the three things which I could list out for this session. If we see a real-time visibility, how does it help? When you have a complete visibility, what's happening at supplier's place, what's happening at plant, what's happening in logistics, what's happening at your warehouses, and what's the buying pattern which consumers are having. This all information will definitely give a very good input to tweak your plan. Second, forecast. Forecast is very important, but other hand is a demand sensing. I'll be covering more in a subsequent slide. Third comes breaking the silos. This is very important. Whenever you come any digital tool is always secondary. First is to address the culture that bringing the alignment at a leadership team. Now here, many organizations still they might be facing this problem. They work in silos. There is one plan with the sales team. There is another plan with the finance. There is a third plan with the supply chain team. And even many times within supply chain team, logistic will have one plan and manufacturing will have other plan and so on. And sourcing might have communicated another plan to their packaging suppliers or raw material suppliers and so on. So first thing to break the silos, and for breaking the silos, there has to be a system by which everything comes on a common platform. Once this all three addressed, there are many more, but I am talking top three. Something is addressed, that will definitely bring the reliability, agility, and effectiveness in the supply chain. How we address this entire thing in Valvoline? Let's look at this. Now here in the next slide, what you're seeing is one side you have supplier, other side you have a customer. An entire supply chain happens in between. This is right from you plan, you source it, you make it, and then deliver it. These are the things which happens all across. Now, if we have a complete visibility within this, then definitely it will increase the speed to market. And for that, we have S/4HANA as a tool or as a platform. And this is what we'll be migrating in the near future. Now we get into further details, getting into each element of those digital initiative which we have done in each vertical. Let's start from sourcing. So we have a SAP Ariba. This is something which we implemented, and SAP Ariba itself is a subject, but in brief, it gives access to universe of vendors, wherein you have a choice, and based on that you are able to optimize sourcing cost, and of course that will straight add on to your delivery cost. We do have a material requirement planning, which is slightly robust. We are going to make it more agile, wherein we should be able to pick it based on the how demand is coming, how demand is changing in the market. Then we have a warehouse management system, and we do have a transport management system. But what we'll be doing, we'll be moving to advanced version of this too. So currently we have a warehouse management system with few limitations, but in future probably we'll be applying many more options which are available with the advanced version. On transport management, currently we do only execution part, but in future we want to do right from transport planning, transport execution, and delivery. And subsequently, we are going to bring even freight management from here. Once freight management comes, it becomes absolutely paperless. That is where you get all the digital invoices, and then payment is being made. Other initiative which we have done is a track and trace of consignments. This we do right from plant to warehouses, and from warehouses to all the customers. This is something which is becoming a prerequisite in many of the industry. But we find something unique in our industry right now. And this is not only track and trace, is beyond that. Here we get a ePOD, which is one of the pain point for the sales team, and there's a pain point for the supply chain. And many times this is linked with the payment to secondary transporters. So that is where it facilitates everything once you have an ePOD. Then we have an e-way bill. Many times error happens. Now the system generated e-way bill will make sure there is no error. Otherwise, this vehicle moves and it gets stuck many times on some of the toll or on the way because of discrepancy in a e-way bill. Then apart from that, we have all those papers, lot of papers like LR and so on. So this entire thing got automated through this. Coming to customers, we have a front-end digital tools like Salesforce.com, Tally, Dash, and so on. So that is where we are able to sense the demand, which I was talking earlier. So we have a forecast, which is for a larger period. But when you get into a day-to-day operation, you need to have some demand sensing, what's happening in the market, so that you can tweak your operation plan. Apart from that, we are going to upgrade our planning tool. We do have a planning tool, but it has some limitations. In future, we are going to have an advanced planning tool. And this planning tool is a complete end-to-end. It will start right from demand planning, supply planning, distribution planning, inventory deployment, SNOP, and then network design. We never had a network design in past, and we used to do in standalone and in isolation. But with this tool, we will be able to do network design, wherein we can optimize number of warehouses, we can optimize number of sourcing locations, and so on. Then we do have a QR code, which we rolled out some 2 years back. And then this was primarily for the product tracking. To explain it further, if someone picks up a bottle in the market, there is a complete trail. This bottle or packaging material from where it was sourced, it has a name of the packaging supplier, when this was produced at plant, when this was transferred to warehouse, and from mother warehouse, when it was transferred to next warehouse and to customer, and so on. And this is something very powerful analytics, and that we use for the various analysis. We are also using this QR code, which is provided by eSeal as a service provider for the WMS purpose. And in future, we are going to use it even for consumer promotions or customer loyalty programs. And apart from that, the QR code, which is running standalone, we have a plan to integrate with the SAP. Once you integrate with the SAP, that is where this becomes seamless process. And when I was talking about the WMS, where you have a set of data available in SAP, and then you have set of data available with the eSeal portal. And once you combine these two portals, all the information flows seamlessly from one portal to other portal. And that is where you get a power of all the information. So once you have this so many initiatives, which you see right from supplier end to customer side, once you put all the analytics together, all the live data together, it gives a very powerful information. And that is where day to day, the plan which we are making it operations plan, the tweaking is possible. For example, if something goes wrong at supplier's place, you have information. You know there is a disruption in a transport side, you have information. You see there is a surge in the demand in a particular market, you have information. This all information always you can incorporate in your operations plan and tweak it, and then realign your supply chain for your day-to-day operation. So that is what it comes from the entire all the digital initiatives, and that is what brings the agility in a supply chain. So this is all about from me, and I'm sure you all must be enjoying this this session at this conference, and I find it quite useful. That's all from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Shashwat and Sanjay. As our panelists for the day have reiterated, the success mantra for organizations as they adjust to the new normal is to improve the process to digital transformation, enabling them to drive profitability with increased efficiency and reduced costs. The traditional approach to supply chain is now passé, as more and more of these organizations are moving away from a supply chain to a resilient and real-time supply network. It was great to hear both Sanjay and Shashwat talk about the ground level realities and challenges being faced by the Valvolines and Unilevers of the world as they drive digital transformation initiatives across their organization, and how partners like eSeal have been enabling them to drive their digital vision. eSeal has been at the forefront in enabling manufacturing companies transform to a digital supply network while integrating with SAP across multiple touch points. eSeal seamlessly integrates with SAP with all the modules of SAP, be it for the ECC or the S/4HANA version. More and more companies are leveraging eSeal to integrate with and extend the value of SAP across the digital supply chain. Do join us for a discovery session as we look at reimagining your digital supply chain transition roadmap. Thank you, one and all, for joining the session. It's been a pleasure, and look forward. Moving on to the next session, higher education is confronting digital disruption. Not only is the industry being disrupted, it is disrupting itself with its ability to be anytime and anywhere. Let us now hear Srikanth and his panel talk about how educational institutions are transforming to smarter and digital universities with the help of SAP. Over to you, Srikanth.